Hey everybody, it is Alex with Optimum Joy, and I have the other Alex in our office. Alex Parlette is a therapist at Optimum Joy, and he is on here to talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, which is attachment, generally speaking. But Alex, why don't you go ahead and just introduce for us what are we even talking about? Why is it important? And even specifically, maybe why it's important to you as a therapist. So that was like three questions rolled into one. Tell me your thoughts on what we're talking about today.
Yeah. So we're talking about attachment, right? And that's not just intimate relationships that you might have with someone, but we're talking about all relationships, right? As humans, we're literally created to be in relationship with people. Doesn't matter how extroverted or introverted you might be, right? We are meant to be with one another in community. And so attachment is extremely important. It's important to me. I've been doing a lot of emotion focused therapy
Hmm.
training, and that's the core to EFT. And so I've seen the power of it, and the power that attachment has on individual lives, but also in like couples and families' lives as well, right? So
Yeah.
um, I see a huge importance of it just in my work in general.
Well, especially, I love what you said before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of it, but what you said about the fact that it's part of all of us. And,
Mm,
bringing in some of that like nerdy neuroscience perspective, it's like that it's actually like hardwired into our brains
mhm,
from childhood, from our birth, from like early caregiver relationships. It shows up in romantic relationships, it shows up at work, shows up in friendships, it shows up when you're a parent. It's
mhm.
like everywhere. And it's basically how our early environment and our primary caregivers, they taught us how to be in relationship and how to get what we need,
Yeah,
So I think that this is actually fundamentally one of the most important topics in any type of therapy you go to. It
absolutely.
like feeds into that. So,
Yeah.
whew, I just had to say that. I think it's so important. I agree with
That's
you.
though, right?
All of a sudden I feel a little fired up around it because I love attachment theory.
Yeah.
Um
I mean, it's heavy. It's a part of us, right? So, um, it's fun to talk about. It's exciting, but it can also be really hard to talk about, right? Because we're talking about family dynamics. We're talking about your support group. We're
Yep.
talking about dating relationships, marriages, right? It's throughout everything. So
Yep.
it can be hard.
And I would say both on the personal and the professional perspective, nothing well, I'll say personally first, nothing makes me cry actually in my
Mm,
life or in my counseling sessions more than attachment geared questions. And as a therapist, nothing has gone right to the heart, whether someone cried or not. A lot of times people do cry, but nothing has gotten more to the heart of who somebody is and how they show up in the world more than attachment questions. And at the end of the day, it's like, how does being loved and loving really like impact and change us?
mhm.
So it's all about love.
It is.
Yeah. So how does this even show up like when you're working with clients? How does this even show up? What does it look like when you engage with people around attachment?
Yeah, so really, it shows up in two different ways that I directly do it, and have conversation with people. If I'm working with an individual, right, it just starts with that conversation of what does your support group look like, right? Through the ups and downs, the good, the bad, the ugly of your life,
Right.
who is it that you're reaching out to talk to about what's going on, right? I usually, a lot in my work, I'll use like that biblical model of support group. But it doesn't have to be at all, right? But you look at Jesus, and he had his 12 disciples, right? So when I'm talking with a client, it's who are your 12, right? But then even within that 12, who are your three people? So those three core people in your life who, again, the good, the bad, the ugly, you reach out to them first, probably, right?
Yeah.
Between the three of them, they know every intimate detail about you. And it's just starting a conversation like that. And if you don't have three people, that's okay, right?
Mhm.
Then the discussion changes to who is there in your life that maybe if we focused on that relationship a little bit more, they could become one of those three for you,
Yeah.
right? And build that support up from there. Starting with the 12 could be daunting, right? especially if someone considers themselves an introvert, right? That could be a lot of people for them to try to build a relationship with. But if we can just start with those three core intimate relationships and then build from there, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that can take a long time to talk about, right? That can take a long time to
Mhm.
build up because there's a lot that goes around that, right? And so, but yeah, starting that conversation there of who are your three, and then who are your 12.
Mhm.
Um, and then attachment within couples looks completely different, right? Where, you know, especially with emotion focused therapy, the whole
Right.
idea of getting the couple, getting you to turn to your spouse, right? Literally turn to them and engage with them. Which, depending on what's going on in the marriage, can be really hard, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of vulnerability to do that. And usually there's some pain or some fears that come up, that the other person is going to be there for them, isn't going to hear them, right?
Yep.
And all of those are specific things that go to their attachment,
Right.
right? And so when we talk about attachment specifically in couples, right, we want that relationship, we want to have them build to have a secure attachment with each other, to where they
Mhm.
feel like they can reach out to their partner and they're there,
Yeah.
right? They can talk to them, all of that.
Well, I'm kind of hearing a really subtle difference in the way you talk about individual work and the way you talk about couple work. Is what was interesting as I was listening to you is almost like in individual work, you're asking the question of um not like who is your support group and let's build up
Mhm.
who you feel securely attached to. Whereas in the couples work, I hear you almost assuming this is your person, this is your support. So how do we interact knowing it's already formed? That you're kind of assuming this is my attached relationship and this is where I go to for safety and comfort and connection and a hug and also to feel affirmed and validated with, or a friendship that kind of some of those attachment pieces are just being assumed within a couple dynamic.
Yeah, well, and that a lot of that goes back to research, right? That we
Mhm.
find within EFT of, in marriages and nowadays, we'll say, right, we're really
Mhm.
looking for our partner to be our best friend, our lover, and our business partner, right?
Mhm.
And all three of those combined, that's a lot to expect out of someone, but we want that, and it's not a bad thing to want that, right? Whereas you look at 60, 40, even 40 years ago when people were getting married, it wasn't just for have a best friend, right? Or even love wasn't even the top four that when women were asked, right? It was financial stability and some other
Sure.
reasons as well, right? And now
Mhm.
we want all of that, and a lot of that has to do with how our society has changed as a whole within Western culture. But we really want our partner to be our best friend, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that type of secure attachment means, you're right. As couples, we're expecting, or maybe even assuming, that this is the person that you want to have that secure attachment with. Maybe you don't right now, but how can we build that back up to the point where you do feel secure within that
Sure.
relationship?
Modern love puts a lot of pressure
Hmm.
on a romantic other to
Hmm.
be your end all be all. They are your savior. They look like a model. All these I can't even think of other ones because you mentioned so many earlier, but it's just like um attachment is not necessarily that person is ticks these categorical boxes. It is like, do I like feel safe? Do I feel connected? Do I have my needs met? And sometimes those go hand in hand with a role that we play. And modern romance puts a lot of expectations on roles for relationships. But attachment is really that um, do I feel safe? And do I get my emotional, physical, um, existential, even like some of these needs, what it is to be a human, is do those get met by this person in a way that feels dependable and
Hmm.
trustworthy? And can I also depend and trust in myself in that? I think sometimes we think attachment only in relationship to what others give to us, but it's
Yeah.
also like our own set. We have to be securely attached to our own selves
Mhm.
as well as securely attached to a other. So,
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
hmm,
So it's a fun topic. There's a
it's
lot there.
it's a lot there. I'm curious, I'll tell you what I'm thinking about first, but the question is kind of if people are working on their attachment in a coupledom or in just like generally in their relationships, do you have like a recommendation for them? And I always think for mine, whenever I think of this for people, because you can be securely attached and then you can be either anxious or avoidantly attached. And then
Yeah.
there's a fourth category, but it basically is like mixed strategies. And for me, I always think do the opposite of what you feel impulsive to do, like what feels like your gut reaction. So for an anxious person, that they instead of an anxiously attached person, I should say, not just anxiety, because anxiety and attachment are different.
Yep.
So like, I'm checking in, I'm checking in, I'm checking in. What's going on with you? Are we safe? Is this okay? That hypervigilance, for
Yep.
them, it's just a hey, take a step back and cool it a little bit and give some space. They need to do the opposite. But for an avoidantly attached person who is like, I am I am, I'm gonna just leave the space. For them, it's just, can you just stay or can you take a step towards? So that's very different. Anxiously attached is almost like do the opposite, take a step back. But for avoidantly attached, it's like do the opposite, take a step forward. So I don't know if there's any general recommendations. It might be that, it might be something different just around if people are working on their attachments, what is it that you, generally speaking, because every person is different, recommend?
Yeah. I mean, so usually, right, our natural instinct is built from, right. So attachment is formed before we're even coherent as children, right? It forms when you're a baby, right? So
Mhm,
we don't necessarily have full control over that. But now, as an adult, right, we get to push back against some of our natural instincts. And usually
mhm.
those are natural instincts because we do what makes us feel safe, right? So if I might be that avoidant attachment, I probably avoid because it keeps me safe, right? And there's a wall there that has kept me safe for a long time, right? And if
Yeah,
it's anxious, right, of like leaning into the person and asking a bunch of questions because you want them to be close, and you feel safe by asking them questions and being there and have them being right there, right?
yeah,
That can feel overwhelming, especially to someone who might have that avoidant attachment style. And
yeah,
so, really what it is, and that's a wall that they've built up for themselves too, to keep them safe. And so really what it is for that avoidant attachment, the way I frame it is, can we build a window or a door just for that one person? If it's a couple, for your partner, right? If it's within an individual, is there a friend in your life that we could just build one door for, that they can come in, right, to get through that wall, and
yeah,
and be close with, right, where we share those intimate details with them. um, and for that anxious, right, it's, can we have that one person to where maybe we allow ourselves to just be with them, right? But
yeah.
calm down, a little bit,
Trust that they're gonna step towards you. Trust that they're gonna meet you. Yeah.
and they're not going to leave, right?
Yeah. Yep. Oh, that's big. That's big for more anxiously attached individuals, as the abandonment and stuff. So,
Yeah.
well, Alex, um, I get the perspective that not a lot of other people do to see that you are supporting people all the time, day in and day out through your work.
Yep.
So, as it relates to their attachment. So, I just appreciate you taking some time to carve out a moment for this conversation. And, I think if anybody is looking to kind of read more about you, probably the best place to go is Optimum Joy Clinical Counseling, and you have Alex Parlette as your bio page there. So, but I just really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on and having a
Yeah,
conversation.
absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.